Well, in recent years, there's been much debate in India around ratings, around rankings. And by and large, while most of us agree that there's no reason why we shouldn't figure more prominently, as we've heard all the speakers, largely our reactions have been broadly in two categories. One, of course, are those who question the need for ratings, question the need for rankings, question the methodology and all of that. And another, who are, to use, for want of a better term, there's a lot of sort of hand-wringing around it. Why are we not figuring? Where are we losing out? What do we do? Oh no, we're never going to make it, and all of that, despite all indications being that we seem to be slowly but steadily getting on the right track. Me, of course, this esteemed panel has been introduced to you now, but I'd like to start by looking at why rankings, the need for rankings. Mr. Pai, with you first. There's been, perhaps not surprisingly, but there's been so much focus on we're a country with our unique challenges. We're a country where it's very different. You can't really compare our institutions to the financially rich institutions that have been around forever, built tremendous reputations. However, the need for ratings and rankings is something that we can't wish away anymore. How do you believe that we should strike this balance?
Well, first let's understand that the world works on a set of rules. And the rules of engagement are drawn up by people who have the power balance in their hands. But we are 17% of this planet. Along with China, we are 40%. This world belongs to us. We must set the rules. Now, we've been out of this rules engagement for long. We must get inside, like in the WTO, like in the United Nations. We must participate and set the rules for the entire world with us participating, because it helps us come up to where we want to be. Now, we can stay out, but we are so globalized today. 50-60% economy is affected by global trends. And very soon, next 10 years, is going to be 75%. So staying out is not an option anymore. So we have to play by the rules. And to play by the rules, we must engage with the rule setters, participate with them, and fight this battle of ideas. Essentially, rule setting is a battle of ideas. So I think we should do it. We should get over all these hang-ups. These hang-ups are irrelevant for the time being.
Right. They're irrelevant for the time being. Dr. Natarajan, how do you believe the paradigm really changing around you? Of course, we have, the IITs usually make it. We've seen this happen here. Very heartwarming, very encouraging to see that, they're holding key positions. But how do you see it sort of expanding beyond?
It's a very provocative question that has been asked. Should we participate in the rankings? Of course, the answers can be yes, no, maybe. In the election stick, and none of the above. You can also say, the point is, why do we compete in Olympics? Why do we compete in world championships and things like that? Because we want to be a part of the world. Now, education, higher education, there are specific criteria and weightages on the basis of which these ranking lists are prepared. It's a matter of serious concern, and that's the reason the secretary also pointed out that even the president said that you cannot ignore them. For too long, we have been ignoring these rankings. Oh, they don't matter to us. In fact, one of the institutions has said that already, but now they are being forced to look at the criteria.
Professor Ramnaran, is that sort of easier said than done, in a sense, when you sort of say that there are some things unique to India, we want that included, that has to be a parameter when we are judged. But then there are all those, who would argue, and a student would say that shouldn't the sort of be a level playing field? Shouldn't the parameters be global and everyone judged on the same standards?
The issue with rankings is that we make the measurable important rather than making the important measurable. What is easy to measure, we use as a parameter, and what is difficult to measure, we ignore. And that is why it has been said earlier, when we want to measure learning outcomes, when you want to measure innovations in education, when you want to measure what's happening for the student to have the right environment in a university, we have no measurables. And we conveniently ignore, and we use the wrong parameters to measure these, and then we say we don't have the right. So I'm not saying that we should run away from, that's exactly what, as Mr. Mohandas Pai said, we have to engage with those who are evolving these parameters, and that's exactly the beginning that we have made. I think we have to be in the system and fight the system, not run away from the system.
Right. Professor Pai, how would you like to see the change? What are the changes that you would suggest, or what are the changes that you would like to see when these rankings talk about India?
Well, I think I'm very aware of the fact that I'm the only person representing a traditional university, and one where social science, the School of Social Sciences is the largest one. Now, I don't think JNU is against rankings, but I would like to point out certain specificities of our university which the ranking system should take into consideration. One is our size. We are only 7,500 students. We have no undergraduates except in the School of Languages. 60% of our students are doing either an MPhil or a PhD, which means we are a research-oriented, highly multidisciplinary university, which means in the morning Mr. Pai mentioned that there should be research universities and teaching universities. In our system, we believe that research is not possible without good classroom teaching. There happens to be a very symbiotic relationship between the two. Your students come to you because you've done that research.
Right.
They are attracted to you and they come to your classes, and that's what makes JNU attractive.
I'm just going to interrupt it for just briefly. Mr. Oliari, you've got sort of a first-hand account on sort of all the challenges that it takes, all the efforts being undertaken. For all those who believe that lots of Indian educational institutions are, in a way, underestimated, globally, how would you respond?
International rankings are primarily about research, because that is what is compared around the world. It's what an academic can read your research and can decide whether it's good or whether it isn't, whereas he or she has no idea really whether you teach well in your classroom. So where your universities are teaching oriented, you will be underestimated in a global sense if there isn't also a research arm. That doesn't mean that they're not valuable universities, and indeed if you had a domestic ranking, probably you would give more credence to the teaching side. In my domestic rankings, research is only a small part of the UK universities, and for that reason, they're in a rather different order to the international ones.
Right.
So I just think not everybody can be at the top of the global rankings as long as they are, and they're as they are at the moment for practical, not philosophical reasons.
Practical reasons and not philosophical. That's important. Mr. Pai and then Professor Ranganath. Mr. Pai, you spoke earlier about private universities and how they're sort of, in a sense, going to lead this, the next generation of Indian institutions, or even the existing ones on these rankings rise, and the sky is going to be the limit. But the challenge faced by our central universities, by all our government-aided institutions, of course, also enormous. There's no dearth of talent, there's no dearth of potential of work being done. But just putting their best foot forward is such an enormous challenge.
Look, their primary obligation is to the student. If JNU gives a degree to the student, JNU should want the degrees recognized all around the world. And wherever the student grows, with the JNU, they should be invited inside the door like Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge. It is their responsibility to make it happen. It's the faculty's responsibility. How do the faculty do that? By having good research, by having linkages, telling the world. Now, if you can't put up data on your web page, you have to do that. You owe it to a student.
Right.
And today we are in a global world. JNU is not just about Delhi or about India.
Right.
It's part of the globe.
Right.
And they've got such fantastic faculty.
Absolutely.
Their faculty is comparable to some of the best in the world. So there's no reason why they should not do it. So the internal challenge. Much of the external challenge about funding is true of all global universities. Oxford has the challenge. Cambridge has the challenge. Everybody's got the challenge. Now they must go out, get funding from private sources, because government funding is coming down. All over the world. It's a global problem. They must get out of their secluded towers and market and try to get more money. I know it's very tough for them because they have ideological leanings in some of these institutions.
And
may not be them.
yes.
So they have this challenge. But I think everybody has to come out and compete in this globalized world.
Professor Ranganath, again, coming back to the focus, how do you see the next few decades when it comes to ratings, rankings? And do you see that India is finally waking up to the need, to the challenge of this?
See, we are dealing with two things now. One is accreditation as this body, and the ranking. These are two different things. Accreditation is the one which makes sure that the institution has the minimum requirements to provide higher education. Ranking, you are measuring a different parameter. So in order to improve this, sometime back, NAC has started NAC ranking, NAC indexing of the Indian universities and Indian colleges. The project is on now. Like that, all these things finally amounts to introspection. And as he said in the morning, during this introspection, either for accreditation or for global ranking, we know our gaps, our weaknesses, and the policymakers have to make sure that those gaps are filled up. And finally, madam, and the last few years, higher education is evolving at a faster rate. In my perception, many of the universities, many of the new institutions which are born with birth defects. Without preparation, without homework, we are creating institutions. Right. And more than 60% of the faculty positions are vacant in the country. Right. How do you assure quality to the students? So there must be structural changes in the policymakers' mind now. You look at the manifestos of all parties today, not even one statement on higher education. Therefore, there must be structural changes, there must be innovation in policymakers, then comes Pi and others.
Right. Right. Mr. Ramaswamy, even as we talk about, the need for ratings, excellence, rankings and all of that, there are still all those institutions who would sort of think twice, who are not willing, as we've discussed, in earlier sessions, to come out, share their data. We heard Dr. Karthik there, speak about this is the figure that we take divided by the rate of the dollar, and there you have how much we are charging. That is the tuition fee. That's the kind of reluctance. They don't want to share information. Often they are very dense, and things aren't always above board either. It's quite a mammoth challenge.
It definitely is. It definitely is, and it starts with some fundamental shift in thinking. A good analogy is like, many of us have kids here, and in their classrooms, right from primary, secondary school, there's a bit of ranking that happens. Nobody questions them as to why is my kid ranked 5th or 6th or something. Nobody questions why is the school getting into ranking. We accept ranking in many facets of life. Right. And we also work towards how do we make this better. Right. Well, if you think that the ranking is not in the right directions, parents do get together and say, why don't you add physical education as a part of it? But that happens only when you are a part of it, you understand and you believe there is something that needs to be different and you represent. Good example is, diversity, and that's my favorite point. In India, diversity is so much. All global rankings give internationalization few marks. I mean, this is a country which has so many states, and what is more international than somebody from South India, studying in Banaras or the other way? Why is that? But that will happen only when somebody stands up and explains that this is the diversity which is the human resources that we are developing should be of global standards. So whatever state we are, we should start thinking globally.
Richard, there are all those cynics who've argued that a reputation of a big educational institution is perhaps like a super tanker. There's, once you've got it on track, there's very little you can do to sort of, unless you do something disastrous, you're going to sort of remain there. With your experience of having seen the best of both worlds, if I may say, you've seen it there, you've seen it here, what do you believe is India's biggest challenge?
I remember being on a similar panel this last year, and a representative from QS stood up and said, actually, he's getting quite frustrated on the stage with some of the kickback, and he said, actually, India is the most difficult country to get data from, and that was the single point I took away from that day. Whereas in countries like the UK, universities have been geared up to kind of share information, open source data, and so on, because they want to be in that competition. They want to rank. I mean, a lot of it's research driven, but they want to be a part of that competition. And so I suppose my humble opinion would be hearing the experts on the panel and others saying it's the transparency and openness of the data which will provide the consistency of the ranking, but also, unfortunately, perhaps reveal, it's the dye that you pour on to reveal the cracks as well. But you need to reveal that before we can then build a solid base.
So what is the basic challenge we have in India? We are a very feudal country. Our institutions stand up and said, if you want to come, we exist for ourselves. We don't exist for you. That has to change. How many of our institutions have gone to the most brilliant young people, given them scholarships and asked them to come, like an Oxford will do, or a Cambridge will do, or anybody else? So we have to create much more open, competitive systems.
They would, of course, say, sir, that they are overwhelmed by the numbers. How many would they respond to? How would you respond to that?
That is ridiculous, because we are a country of 1.3 billion. You can't escape. Right. And to think that an IIM, many IIMs are here, can need only 100 people to come, and only 100 are the best. At the IIT will admit only 500. We don't want more, because quality will come in a 1.3 billion country. It's totally ridiculous. Quality and quantity go hand in hand. The world has said that, everybody has said that, and we can't be an exclusion. So we got to be much more open. We need much more competition. We got to put the student at the heart of everything and not institutions. It's the student. Right. And the only way it will come is by being transparent, giving all the data, empowering the student. Then you'll see a very different India. Right.